always remember when I did not understand how I used to stand under all the fool's rules running these lands. I had my head in the sand and I was asleep. Now I learn a little more every day, and I'm waking the sheep. Gonna say it out loud, say it proud, get it out, 'cause I'm burning inside, cannot hide it no more. I'm a raconteur too. Yeah, I'm a raconteur too. Oh, I'm a raconteur too. Oh, the people in the chat room singing. Oh, I'm a raconteur too. One more time now. Oh, I'm a raconteur too.
And welcome to Raconteurs News this Monday evening. It's the 30th of April 2018. I hope you've had a good day, a good productive day. It's nice and sunny here actually. The clouds, there is some clouds, but the little fluffy ones, but you can see that behind it's just like the milky white stuff. It's not a proper blue sky like we ought to get, but we'll try to struggle on. Listen, I've had I've just took my dog to get his vaccinations at 6 o'clock. It was supposed to be 6 o'clock, and by 20 to 7, I'd just gone in. So I've been running about like a blue arse fly, and I've come across a problem with the Facebook Live as well. It's not allowing me to do a Facebook Live show, so that's going to be quite difficult. I'm going to try and do that over the period of time that we are here during our conversation with our guest tonight. But first of all, let me introduce, welcome back to Blighty from his travels in Thailand. Aid Hardy's joining me tonight. How are you doing, Aid? All right, mate?
I'm good. I'm really good, mate. Thank you. And I got some great news this morning on BBC News.
Okay, what was that?
Well, apparently, if I've not got a TV licence, I don't need one to watch the royal wedding.
Oh, right, okay.
So, you know,
Has that still happened yet?
I don't know. I just found it absolutely fantastic when on every single news thing on the BBC. Apparently, the BBC have got special dispensation to tell you when you do and don't have to have a TV licence, and that they've deemed that everybody can watch the royal wedding, even if you've not got a TV licence. So.
Unbelievable. Of course, I'm going to be joined by Paul Webster as well a little bit later on, but Paul's just running a bit late. I probably said he'd be about 7:30 when he's on, so we'll be looking forward to that. We'll be looking forward to Paul joining us a bit later on. But we've got a great guest this evening. We've been trying for a long time to get him on. I know when you used to do Raconteurs to the Monday night show, AD, I know that you were interested in this subject, the subject that our guest this evening is an expert on. So you'll probably enjoy this just as much as myself and Paul. So without further ado, introduce our guest tonight, Ian Crane. How are you doing, Ian?
I'm good. Thanks for the invitation. And the reason I was never available on the Monday night is because Monday night used to be the night that I broadcast Fracking Nightmare and Humanity vs. Insanity, but I've now moved that to a more occasional Thursday night slot.
Brilliant. Well, we are really pleased that you've been able to join us tonight. There's so much for us to talk about. I mean, whether we talk about fracking or 5G or the trees or any of these situations, where do you want to start us off tonight, Ian? What's new? How's the fracking situation at the moment?
Well, I guess that to some extent it's a day at least of minor celebration, seeing as Amber Rudd got canned, and she's had it coming a long time. But Amber Rudd, she's a relatively young MP, certainly young in experience. She's only been in Parliament since 2010, and had a fairly rapid rise to fame. But she proved that she had all the qualities to be a politician when she was working in the Department of Energy, and basically, she proved that she was a sociopathic liar. So she was perfectly qualified And, of course, this latest debacle where she clearly, blatantly lied. And if she didn't, then basically she was incompetent and not fit to be in that particular job. So I don't think anybody in the anti-fracking community is going to be too sorry to see her go. And they might, it might actually, to some extent, work in our favour, because Saeed Javid, who has been moved to replace her, of course, he had a pretty sorry track record as well, because he was the Secretary of State who overruled the local council in Lancashire and insisted that there be a public inquiry following their decision to reject Quadrilla's application to frack in the Fylde. And the planning inspector basically did what she was told, which is effectively permitted Quadrilla to establish the well site at Preston New Road, which is not far off a potential frack right now, and also said that he was minded to approve the other application at Rossiter, where another inquiry finished last week. And so now that Saeed Javid is out the frame, and interestingly, the replacement for Saeed Javid, I believe, is a cancer survivor. I believe he actually has survived lung cancer. Considering that fracking is proven to have contributed significantly to rises in cancer in the areas for the population who happen to have the misfortune to live in the sacrifice zones in the US. So, just maybe he might be a little bit more hesitant to sign off on this industry. So, where we're at right now with the fracking campaign is that, it is now nearly, 6 years, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. We're in the 6th year since the moratorium was lifted in December 2012. And in those 6 years, the anti-fracking community has managed to prevent any further frack in this country. And say the only location that's at risk of being fracked in 2018 is at Preston New Road, just outside Blackpool. But, a lot can happen between now and when Quadrilla expect to fire up the pumps. Just a few months ago, Third Energy in North Yorkshire, and of course Third Energy was a wholly owned entity of Barclays Bank, and Third Energy had all the kit on site and, were fully expecting to be fracking at Kirby Misperton before the year end. But they've now taken all the kit off and ridden off into the sunset with their tail very firmly between their legs. And that was due to the phenomenal pressure that was put on Greg Clark as Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy to take a good hard look at the finances of Third Energy, because Barclays Bank had basically said, that's it, you're not getting any more money out of us. And they were delaying publishing their accounts. And when eventually they did publish their accounts, basically it was almost laughable. I mean, they have a combined, between the two companies, Third Energy Onshore and Third Energy Offshore, they have combined debts of over £100 million on revenue, annual revenue of barely £500,000. So Greg Clark, being the smart Teessider lad that he is, realised that if he did sign off on it, then basically his career in politics was likely to be somewhat curtailed. And, he's a guy that has ambition up to and including eventually getting into number 10. So, he did the right thing. So that was a fantastic achievement. It was a fantastic battle to win, but it was only a battle, and the war still has to be won. Yeah,
of course it does. But you are having significant victories. I mean, AD, you used to do the Monday night show, and there were some points that you wanted to bring up to Ian, weren't there? That you were wanting to ask him previously.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, sort of about 3 miles in either direction of my house, there's potential fracking sites. One at Hart Hill,
yeah,
and the other one at Marsh Lane or Eckington, I think they're calling that one. And I live sort of slap bang in the middle of the two. And as always, a lot of the residents are, there's going to be a nodding donkey sort of scenario. They're certainly in the Marsh Lane area. They've been a bit slower on the uptake, whereas Harthill, because there's been more activity up there, the residents seem to have really taken it on board and got together. Certainly when you go through the village, there's an awful lot of posters up, activity, meetings, etc. Quite strangely, closer to the actual site is a really, really expensive village to live in. It really is quite well to do. And I went through there about 3 weeks ago, and not a poster in sight, which I was a bit sort of surprised at, really. I think because of the name of the site, it's called Harthill, but actually where it is, it's much closer to another village. And they just don't seem to have taken it on the chin. One thing that was sort of brought to our attention in the information that we came across on previous shows was, if the anything that's actually been installed for, in brackets, infrastructure, there are different laws that the police are using in order to stop any gathering or protesting or anything that would actually put a stop to what the drilling companies want to do. How's that sort of affected things, Ian?
Okay, well, first of all, it's rather unfortunate that you live where you do, because you are right in the middle of a prime sacrifice zone. Yeah. And, of course, you are in an area that is licensed to INEOS, which is a private company. It's owned by a guy called Jim Ratcliffe, who, as of Friday, Forbes magazine listed his personal net wealth as £12 billion, because he is the private owner of INEOS. It's not a publicly listed company.
Right.
So it's not known exactly how much of INEOS he owns, but reportedly it's something in the region of 60% or so. But he has personal net wealth of some £12 billion. And his attitude is, I can do what the frack I like. And anybody who gets in my way, I will either sue them or I will buy them. And so what you have is Harthill, of course, I think falls within the boundaries of Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council.
That's right.
And INEOS got somewhat frustrated that Rotherham weren't dealing with the application quick enough, so they basically made an appeal to the Secretary of State and said, look, we want to bypass the local planning process and we want to go straight to a public inquiry, which, of course, understandably, really pissed off the residents of Rotherham and certainly the council. So the council had a special meeting and decided that they would oppose the INEOS application at the public inquiry. And I believe it was a unanimous vote. Now, what was perhaps more remarkable was that Eckington, which of course falls into Derbyshire, which is a Tory-held county council, but INEOS did exactly the same thing. And they basically said, look, we're really not very happy with that. This application seems to be taking so long, when in reality it was actually INEOS that were the cause for all the delays. But anyway, INEOS basically said, we want to bypass the county council planning process and go straight to public inquiry. Now here, when the council took the decision as to whether they were going to support or oppose the INEOS application at the public inquiry, it was 9-1 against. So, that's a very, very significant result in a Tory-held council. Now, obviously, at the moment, the two locations are not at risk of being fracked this year. And, INEOS, of course, are also trying to get access to National Trust property at, in particular, Clumber Park in Nottinghamshire. And because the National Trust have said, well, you're not actually coming on our property to do your seismic testing, so INEOS are now suing the National Trust. So INEOS are not winning a lot of friends, but, Jim Ratcliffe isn't in the business of making friends. He didn't accrue a personal net wealth of £12 billion by seeking to be Mr. Popular. I mean, he is Mr. Popular, of course, because everybody wants to kiss his proverbial butt, in the hope that some of his wealth might just trickle down in their direction. So, you know, what we have right now is the communities in South Yorkshire and in Derbyshire, maybe not so much in specific villages, but I mean the community in Eckington has really got its act together. And I went to a community meeting in Eckington. Now, it was just a normal monthly meeting at the beginning of the year. And normally at these kind of meetings, you know, you'd expect maybe a dozen or so people, but there were 80 plus people at this meeting. And the guy who is really driving the campaign, he's leading it very much from the front, but on the other hand, he's doing it in a very inclusive way. And that's a guy called Dave Kesteven, who I believe is head gardener of one of the stately homes in that area.
That's right, he is, yeah.
And he's really doing a superb job. But like I said, you know, he's doing it in a very inclusive way. So, you know, he's just really effectively marshalling the local community in their opposition to INEOS. And, you know, what people need to get their heads around is INEOS are seeking pretty much open access to do seismic surveys. You don't do seismic surveys unless you intend drilling. And you don't.
Of course, why would you?
Well, and you don't drill. You don't drill unless you intend fracking.
Well,
and it's not just one well.
Yeah, one thing we were made aware of on the previous shows that we did was that if they do the seismic testing and find what they are looking for, then they are legally bound to take it out of the ground.
Well, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, basically, their license obviously does require them to explore and potentially exploit both conventional and unconventional resources, but their primary target is unconventional because that's what's in the Boland Shale.
Yeah,
and
sure.
the Boland Shale is quite possibly one of the most significant deposits of shale. It's a very tight geology, which is why it has to be fracked. But it's probably one of the most significant repositories of this geology in Western Europe, not because of the area, but because of its thickness, because it's an average of 5,000 feet thick. And so consequently, that would enable the companies to effectively, if they get their foot in the door or their bits in the ground, they could potentially be there for 50 plus years. So this isn't in any way a bridge, which it's presented at. It's a bridge to nothing, because these companies will look to maximize the return on their outlay, and so consequently they will just frack and frack and frack until basically either the ground collapses beneath them, the contamination is so great that, you know, they're run out of town by the local population, or they run out of gas, you know, whichever comes first. And the likelihood is the contamination would come first.
Yeah, sure. With the let's call them active, the people who are active actually on the sites and in the villages. I know there's been cases where people have done lock-ons, etc., and the police have tried to use various powers. With the learning of the infrastructure and that changing what the police can and cannot do, and effectively giving them a lot more power than they had, what's actually happened at the sharp end and with people who are actually doing the protesting?
Well, what has happened is that the police are demonstrating unequivocally that they are not there to keep the peace.
Yeah.
They are there to enforce the government agenda. Now, you know, let's bear in mind, by the way, that, I mean, this is an industry that has been banned in Scotland, is effectively banned in Wales, is effectively banned in Northern Ireland, and is banned in Southern Ireland, in Eire.
Yeah.
And is also banned in France. And yet here we have in England a government that appears to be locked into this agenda, this commitment to exploit unconventional hydrocarbons, despite the rising opposition. And there's no question there are elements within the government that are seeking to bring in legislation to prevent any opposition. Now, the direct action has certainly had a very, very significant effect. I mean, Quadrilla in Lancashire brag that they have contributed some, I don't know what it is today, £9 million or something, to the Lancashire economy since they moved on to that site back in January of 2017. But of course, the absurdity of this is that the police operation in Lancashire has cost at least that. And the Police and Crime Commissioner in Lancashire has asked the government, to help out. And basically the government, I think, gave them 2 million and said, that's your lot. So, and that's just one location. I mean, as this spreads, if it does spread, then, there will be opposition at every single well site. And basically there aren't enough police to police it effectively. And the reality is that the police behave with undue aggression. And they're basically being told that the anti-fracking community consists of people who are borderline domestic extremists, which is a bit absurd when you consider that the average age within the anti-fracking community is the wrong side of 60.
Yeah.
And the vast majority, but the majority of campaigners and active campaigners are female. And
well, you actually hit on something spot on. There's a lot of Raconteurs News listeners will remember Daisy. Daisy was an NHS whistleblower who was then targeted by that NHS and ended up in a mental institution. They sectioned her to shut her up. And we've done 2 or 3 interviews with Daisy, and I was very much personally involved with her, supporting her and helping her get released with the help of quite a few people. And she still now is under the mental health scheme, but she's also very concerned about fracking because she's got family who live not far from Kirby Misperton. And she was up there a few weeks ago, and I rang her one day and said, how are you? Well, apart from a bad muscle sprain in my back, and she listed all these injuries, how did that happen to you? Oh, it was the bastard police when they finally dragged me out from... they left me till last because I was the one saying all the legal stuff that they actually understood. And they left her till last, made sure there was no cameras watching, then physically dragged her out of there.
Yeah, I have to say that obviously I have first-hand experience of the policing in Kirby Misperton, and in fact, I was wrongfully arrested at the very first lock-on, and that was a deliberate attempt to obviously prevent me from filming. And although I was only in the cells for about 2, maybe 3 hours at most, before they reviewed their own footage and realised that there was no justification for the arrest whatsoever. So obviously I was released, but nonetheless it was very effective for them because it meant that I didn't have my camera on the unfolding events that day.
Yep.
And subsequently, I mean, I'm not about to. I mean, I have no intention of getting arrested. I can be a lot more effective in doing what I do by not getting arrested. My role there really is to document what's occurring and to get it out into the wider alternative community as rapidly as possible. I mean, that's a massive advantage that we have over the lamestream media. Their stuff all has to go through the editing process and scheduling process. With alternative media, we can just bang it out, real time. And so what we've seen at Kirby Misperton is since September of last year, the policing get increasingly aggressive. And there's some irony. One of the inspectors that was put on the ground at Kirby Misperton on a fairly regular basis initially was Inspector John Hodgen. Now, the reason that he sticks in my mind is because initially he refused to give me his name. And if he'd have just said, my name's Inspector Hodgen, that would have been it. End of. But when somebody refuses to give you their name, there's got to be a reason.
Yep.
So obviously, as soon as I got back onto a computer, It took me about 3.5 nanoseconds to establish that his day job, when he wasn't marshalling the forces on the ground at Kirby Misperton, his day job was head of North Yorkshire's fraud and economic crime squad.
What?
Yeah, and I mean, look at the irony, look at the absurdity. There he was, facilitating an operation for Third Energy, who basically, had he done his job and investigated their finances, then, right from the get-go, it would have been fairly apparent that Third Energy was not in any financial fit state to be operating there, let alone to be commanding the use of some 50 to 100 officers from North Yorkshire Police almost on a daily basis to facilitate the equipment going in. So I'm sure that Inspector John Hodgen, feels somewhat embarrassed by the fact that ultimately it was the protection community that did his job for him and flagged up to Greg Clark the bankruptcy, basically, of the country, of that company. I mean, they should not have been operating. If that had been any other business, they would have been insolvent. And in fact, the Home Office was really not doing its job, because it should have made Third Energy, or effectively forced them into insolvency, when they failed to publish their accounts for the second year running, and they were 4 months late publishing their accounts. But because obviously of the sensitivity of the industry, then the Home Office turns a blind eye to this. Fortunately, Greg Clark didn't. But I don't think we'll be seeing Third Energy back at Kirby Misperton anytime soon. But what we did see is that, like I said, was this escalation of gratuitous aggression. And, in theory, the police should not lay a hand on you unless they're going to arrest you.
That's right.
Right? But what they decided to do, and what they are doing now throughout the country with the anti-fracking campaign, is they are simply physically lifting people out the way.
Yeah, and these are, like you said, the people that they're bullying, the people that they're manhandling. These are people who are not going to be putting up much of a fight, because they're just older generation people wanting to just look after their communities.
Well, I'm staggered, really, on one level, that these police officers can behave in this way. But the reality is, to be a police officer in Britain in the 21st century, you have to have either a room temperature IQ, or you have to literally leave your brain in the locker room, when you arrive for work. And once you put the earpiece in, then effectively you are a drone. You are no longer capable of independent thought. You are simply a bot that will follow whatever instruction comes through your earpiece.
And then somehow they've got this.
Sorry, AD. Just before you do that, I just want to tell our listeners that we are now on Facebook Live. So I've managed to get the glitch, whatever it was, going, and we are broadcasting on Facebook Live from my Facebook account. So if you want to see us and listen as well, it's good quality audio. So we're now on Facebook Live as well. So join us on there, and a big hello to everybody that's in there already and posting messages and questions. Ada, go on, you carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, these police officers, and my brother was a copper for 30 years till he retired, and for 12 of those years, he literally counted down how many shifts he'd got to do before he could get his pension, because when he joined, he wanted to be the guy who helped everybody. And because of that, he actually retired as a constable. Never made sergeant, because he was always the one asking the questions, saying, "I'm sorry, but I'm not going to stand on a street corner with a speed gun. I don't mind stopping a lorry that's 10 ton overweight because he might kill somebody. But to stand on a corner and, get 60 quid out of somebody because they're doing 2 mile an hour too much, I'm not willing to do that." I'm not saying, is the ideal copper, because I've got next to no respect for most coppers. And I've always said, if the copper's there to stop somebody getting beat up, is your best friend. if he's there to stop somebody breaking in your house, he's your best friend. The minute he wants your name, he's a twat, because all he wants is a contract. Yeah. And that's the end of it. But the other thing with the police, where you said that they've got this kind of put their earpiece in and they become a drone, they then get this, well, I'm only following orders, like it's not their responsibility. And it is their responsibility, because at the end of the day, they are a human being. All right, they're wearing fancy dress, but they are a human being, and they are responsible for their actions. And I truly believe that something will happen at something that there are so many people in this country now so pissed off about fracking and God knows how many other things. I absolutely believe that at some point, one of them will publicly do something so wrong, and then the case will be against the actual man and not his uniform or badge number.
Well, of course, this is the Nuremberg defence,
Yes, absolutely.
Following orders, and it's remarkable how often this is trotted out as their defence. And the other one, of course, is that, well, I'm not allowed to have a point of view while I'm wearing a uniform. Well, we know that, of course. And you're right. I mean, sadly, last October, I was actually shown an internal communication by a very high-level civil servant who is actually on our side. And he said, unfortunately, I can't let you have a copy of this, but he said, read this and you'll get an idea of what we are dealing with. And basically, it was in reference to the policing on the anti-fracking campaign. And what it basically said was that the role of the police was being deliberately escalated in a bid to destroy the last vestige of confidence between the local community and their police. And the last sentence was so Kafkaesque or Orwellian that it's indelibly printed on my brain. And basically it said the objective is to achieve a motivation for change that is greater than the motivation to remain with the status quo. And what they want to do, what the ultimate objective is to take the police away from corporate enforcement. Yeah. And what they want to do is to hand that over to private security like G4S or Circa.
Ian, I've actually got a note here. When you said there aren't enough police officers, I wrote down at that point, private policing ? And that, at some point, was going to be my question. And you've just gone straight there.
Well, that's exactly the agenda. And, what I was shown, and I have no reason to doubt the veracity of the document, what I was shown was the prima facie evidence that there are elements within the establishment that basically want to create such a rift between the police and the local population that they want the police themselves, the senior police officers themselves, to basically say, we don't want to be policing a corporate agenda. And, of course, then that begs the question, well, who is? So that's when you say, okay, as far as anything that is regarded as, we'll take your term, national infrastructure, will be policed, inverted commas, by private security. And then, of course, the gloves are off, because, if we think that the frontline police, and particularly the level ones, I mean, they are like a tightly wound spring. And you should see, I mean, on some days, it really looks like they've had steroids or cocaine for breakfast. There's something not right about the way they look at you, the way they behave. And of course, we know, like I said, that they've been briefed that the anti-fracking community are borderline domestic extremists. And, for goodness sake, don't let them know where you live, because they'll be down your street and they'll be harassing your family. I mean, there's not a single case where that's occurred. In 5.5 years of anti-fracking opposition, protesting, protecting, call it what you like, but there hasn't been a single case of aggression by a protector. And yet we have had cases of aggression by the police, and cases of aggression by the employees who work for these companies. And in fact, we have a court case that was conveniently postponed or adjourned a couple of months ago because the timing would have been embarrassing for the government and for Third Energy. And it's now postponed until, I think, the end of May. But this is where a driver on the Third Energy payroll deliberately turned his vehicle into a protector who was riding a bike. And it just so happened that I caught it on video. So, when it goes to court, the guy's going to have to explain, his actions, not just on hearsay, but from the video. But this is the dichotomy that's being created, in that the media and the establishment try and label the protection community as aggressive, as borderline violent, and yet the opposite is the case. And obviously what they're trying to do is they're trying to discourage people from joining the protectors on the front line. And we always make the observation, we say, look, there's no requirement for anybody to get arrested. Even if you're just down there and you're standing in the background observing, at least you get to see what goes on. You don't have to get in amongst the thick of it. And we've all been through our learning process. I mean, I had never been involved in anything like this until Borkum. And at Borkum, I mean, it was a totally new experience to me, being up close and personal with the police in riot gear. And so I spent the Borkum campaign, which was basically about 2 months in the late summer of 2013, observing and learning. And then when I went almost straight away up to Barton Moss, I'd obviously got a little bit more experience. And then after the Barton Moss campaign, I went to Crawberry Hill, where I gained more experience. And now, I'm I won't say an old hand, but I've got more than my fair share of experience of being up close and personal with what might have once been described as Britain's finest. But I'm afraid I certainly wouldn't be using that nomenclature anymore.
No, and I mean, I think the thing that you really hit on was, as soon as they put that earpiece in, that's it. It's just this, I'm wearing a uniform, I've been told to do this, it's not my fault, and you're just going to have to live with it. And then they just get on with it. And they just think they're wearing some kind of cloaking device. And I am absolutely not looking forward to somebody getting injured, but absolutely looking forward to a case where somebody has got enough evidence to take a particular, let's call them a police officer, because it is an office, and it is about money, and to drag them over the coals for it.
Absolutely. It's going to happen at some point because, we've had situations. In fact, we had a couple of arrests at Miss and Spriggs where the officer was so much on a mission to make the arrest. And these were two ladies who are past retirement age. And the sergeant was actually trying to say to him, they're walking away. And the sergeant was trying to counsel him not to pursue with the arrests. But, he was so focused that he made these two arrests. And I challenged the sergeant afterwards and said, basically, you were instructing him not to pursue the arrest, so why didn't you step in? And the sergeant's response was, well, I can either choose to give counsel or I can choose to give an order. And on this occasion, I was just giving counsel. Which, So anyway, he will have to answer that in court when that case comes to court.
Yeah, and it needs to happen. It absolutely needs to happen. And whether that's police coming unlawfully through somebody's door, or to fit a meter, whether it's on a frack or whatever the situation, it needs to happen, and it needs to happen in a massive public way. Well,
I think something is coming, because the anti-fracking community has burgeoned, obviously, since 2013. And, the reason I got involved was because I'd been out in Australia. And I'd been out there in 2011 and 2012 to do some lecture tours. I wasn't talking about anything associated with fracking. I was talking about the Australian economy. But in 2012, in November, I went out to the Australian gas fields and was given a tour around by one of the residents there, and was really shocked by what I saw. And I actually made the observation, which is a bit crass, but I said, you know what? Thank God we've got a moratorium in place in the UK. Well, that observation came back to haunt me, because a week after I landed back in the UK from completing that tour, the moratorium was lifted. And I decided that, based on, what I knew and what I'd seen, I couldn't let this pass. So I immediately cancelled all the plans I had for 2013, and I put in place a 63-date tour around this country and Ireland and Scotland and Wales to try and sow seeds and try and raise awareness of what was coming. And I made the observation that the only way in which we're going to stop this is for community groups. NGOs aren't going to cut it. NGOs can be supportive of community groups, but this is going to have to be fought community by community. And that's why we've had the success we've had. But whereas, 30% of the country right now is licensed for unconventional gas exploitation, for fracking, but the entire country is about to face an assault that, in my opinion, is potentially far more pernicious than fracking. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not making light of the fracking issue, because, the contamination that will manifest from that, if the industry gets ahead, will be something that this country, will not be able to deal with, because we just don't have the water resources. We don't have the methodology to cleanse the water once it's been contaminated by either the chemicals of the frac fluid or flowback waste, bringing all the crap with it that comes from the geology. But what's coming with 5G, the fifth generation of the mobile phone network, is going to be all pervasive, and this is going to hit every single town and city, potentially by the early 2020s. And then by sort of the mid-20s, if it gets a foothold, it'll be rolled out into the rural communities. And 5G is a microwave technology, so it works in a completely different way to the existing 4G technology, which is why I can sit here in my retreat in the southwest of England, and, I'm quite some distance from any phone mast, and yet, we have very clear audio signal, although we wouldn't if I was trying to video as well. But I cannot see a phone mast. With 5G, we will have to increase the number of transmitter receivers in the country by a factor of 10. So it's estimated that something in the region of 50,000 plus phone masts around the country right now for the existing system. With 5G, it's going to have to be at least 10 times that. And the problem is that street lamps are being replaced, and the old sodium lighting is being replaced with LED lighting, and the LED lighting is causing problems because of the frequencies that are emitted, the light frequencies that are emitted by the LED street lights. And on the top of the LED street lights are the transmitter receivers that are 5G ready, so that basically there will be a 5G signal emanating potentially from every single lamppost around the country within the space of 2 to 3 years.
Just linking the 5G, I mean, as you probably know, in Sheffield, they're busy chopping trees down, telling everybody so that we can get mobility scooters up and down the pavement, because these very old and very mature trees are, the roots are digging up the pavement. So they're telling everybody, oh, well, these trees, I mean, they're chopping trees down that have got preservation orders on them. Now, we've got the groups in Sheffield who don't know why these trees are being chopped down, because there's obviously no logical reason for it. But when, they're being approached to say, well, it's because of 5G. Oh, no, it can't be because of that. Now, one thing I am aware of is, with the police radios that they use, they use, at the moment, 4G telephone technology. Living where I do, I'm not only right in between two frack sites, I'm right on the corner of North Nottinghamshire, North East Derbyshire and South Yorkshire. And I'm also about a mile from the M1. So whenever there's a lot of activity on the M1 with police, ambulance, fire or whoever, you can't get a bloody phone signal where I am, because you can be on a call with, loads of signal showing on your screen, and all of a sudden, bump, you've gone. Because if the emergency services need that channel, you've gone. Mm. Now, with the new 5G system, I'm assuming that when the government sell these licenses to the telephone companies, they use that to effectively pay for the police and the fire and the ambulance radio system. How do you think that's going to hang in with the 5G? Do you think the emergency services, do you think they're going to be the guinea pigs? How do you think this is going to roll out in?
Well, it's quite possible. I mean, the police, of course, were the guinea pigs with Tetra, which will never be rolled out anywhere else. And, I think it's Barry Trower that has done the most research into Tetra. But, what I do know is that when Tetra was rolled out and the occupational health professionals who were responsible for providing support to the various police forces were starting to realise that there were clusters of problems with cheekbones and eyes and, cancers and tumours. And rather than address the problem, which was, according to Barry Trower, the proximity of the Tetra radio to their face, they abolished the occupational health support to the police and made them go to their own doctors so that the doctors wouldn't see the cluster of issues within the police. It's hide the problem.
Yeah, it's another case of nothing to see here, providing we manage to disperse it well enough.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so, yes, it is distinctly possible that they'll be at the forefront of the trials. Mm. But, let's take a look at the evidence that Mark Steele is starting to amass in Gateshead, where they've rolled out.
We had Mark Steele on a couple of weeks ago, Ian. Okay,
so Mark will have shared with you then his concerns, and Mark will be speaking at the AB9 conference this coming weekend. This is why we've got the double whammy of the LED streetlights and the 5G masts, and the reason the trees are coming down, whether people want to acknowledge it or not, the reason the trees are coming down is because 5G won't function in tree-lined streets. And if anybody wants to really challenge that, then I would simply refer them to the Surrey University paper, which is freely available online. And it's the University of Surrey, the Institute for Communication Systems, and then tagged the 5G Innovation Centre. Well, section 3.1 of that report is titled Mast Height to Tree Level as a Limiting Factor on Reach and Reliability. And it spells out the fact that if 5G is to work effectively, then the trees have to be removed. And I gather that there is now no planning process for a telecom company that wants to put up a mast that is apparently less than, I think it's 15 metres. That's
the normal ridge height of a house, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's why, you're putting them on the top of lampposts, you're not going to need any planning permission for them. Whereas if you're going to try and get over the trees, the masts are going to have to be much higher. And in fact, in this report, it actually talks about, masts being in the region of, where it says at 25 metres, the probability drops to less than 1%, which is a significant improvement. So, what they're looking at is at 15 metres, there is a 10% chance of blockage, but a mast that is less than 10 metres tall has a 30% chance of being blocked by trees.
Wow.
So where it goes on to say, whereas 15 metres, there's only 10% chance of blockage. At 25 metres, the probability drops to less than 1%. So what they're looking at is establishing in the rural areas masts of 25 meters plus to be able to get over the trees and reach the distant properties. But in the towns, the way they're looking to do it is put these short wave transmitters on the tops of the streetlights. And as Mark will have, I'm sure, explained, you know, because of the way this is set, it effectively creates the opportunity for phased array radar, so that whatever is watching, and it won't be human, it'll be artificial intelligence, can actually detect how many people are in a house, where they are in the house, what they're doing in the house. You know, this is 1984, and it shouldn't surprise us, because what's rolling out is an agenda that was pretty much established in 1932 with the document Technocracy, Inc., written by Marion King Hubbard and Howard Scott. And although that document's not easy to find, the document that was written some 35 years later or so, 36 years later, by Zbigniew Brzezinski. In fact, it was converted into a book called Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era.
Yeah.
And this was Brzezinski effectively updating Technocracy, Inc. But nonetheless, it was still regarded as visionary because the technology didn't exist, or certainly wasn't in the public domain, for what he was prescribing. Now it does. So, you know, this is the total control grid. And in that book, which is freely available, people can download it. It's called Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era. It's available in a PDF. It only runs to about 112 pages. And, you know, when you consider this was written in the late 1960s, published in 1970, and you look at what is occurring right now, you can see that this was all planned. And, you know, the establishment, they work on the basis that they have to tell us what it is they're going to do. And they've been telling us what they're going to do since 1932 on this. Yeah. And then Brzezinski, you know, updated it in 1969. And one of the quotes from that book, Brzezinski says that, you know, in the future, a technocratic elite will govern on the basis of their superior technical capabilities. And it says that they will not be bound by traditional liberal values. In other words, basically, they will not have any respect for the wider population.
So just to put that into Raconteurs news, they don't give a fuck about us. They're just going to do what the shit they like and bollocks to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what he said, yeah.
Ian, we've got about 6 or 7 minutes before we're going to take a short break. But before we do that, there's a couple of things I've actually had on my own personal phone. People want to ask you things, and a couple in the chat room. So if we can just hold your thoughts where they are, because they're just going to get deeper and deeper and deeper, which is exactly what we want. You mentioned about your 68 days that you did on your frack tour. There was myself and Daisy, the girl I was on about, who was the NHS whistleblower who got injured at the frack site. She sent me a message, tell Ian he is well thought of, and the anti-frackers need to wake up to all the other issues that Ian is trying to educate them on. That's come to my personal phone. I've had another one in the chat room. Chris Jones. Chris asks, I wonder if the accredited person scheme is to be increased for the private corporate security personnel.
I think that's absolutely a given.
It's got to be, hasn't it? It's got to be.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and again, I think this ties in with what you've just said about the technology, etc. It is 1984, just rushing ahead at one hell of a pace. That's exactly what it is.
Well, it's 1984 on acid.
Yes, yeah.
I was just thinking, Ian, how long do you think before we're in a situation where we're in that in the film and subsequent TV series Logan's Run? Remember that one?
God, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, from the 1960s, was it? I think
70s. 70s, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, it's all being spelled out. I mean, the agenda is pumped out through Hollywood, and now through Netflix, with the various series that they put out, and of course what this does is it conditions the masses. It nullifies them against what is being rolled out, and of course one of the primary ways in which they prevent people from taking any interest in what's occurring is to keep them in absolute debt slavery. And it's no surprise that it's literally the last 21 years, because one of the first things that Tony Blair did when he came into office was introduce student loans, and the purpose of that was to get the students into hock, whilst they were at university, so completely neutering any nascent political awareness, within the student population. And when you consider the role that the students played in the not just the British political scene, but the global political scene in the 60s, compared to what it is now. I mean, basically, sadly, our young generation. I mean, there obviously are many exceptions that prove the rule, but our young generation are a shadow of the generation of the 60s. Oh God, yeah.
I mean, there was always the students protesting against this and on a march against that, and now they don't do anything because, oh my God, we've got this debt at the end of all this, so what we need to do is get our head down and learn how to be a sheep so that we can pay our taxes.
Well, they've been indoctrinated into it, haven't they? Of course they have. If Tony Blair introduced student loans in 1997, or just after that, then these people, that's when these people would have been going into education. I mean, it's 20 years. My daughters were born in 1997. She's 20 years old now. She didn't speak to me because I raised my voice at her one time. It's just ridiculous. So this is what's happening. Listen, we are at the just about at the 1 hour mark. Thanks very much for the first hour, Ian. I hope you're going to stick around. Loads and loads of good information coming out today from you. We've got loads of people in the chat room as well.
I can stick with you for another half hour, then I have to run.
Well, right, that's no problem at all.
Jason, shall we just keep going and have a short break and then carry on after that, do you think? Or when Ian has to run?
Yeah, we can do that. Well, we can do that if you want. I just need to nip off and just see to something.
Yes, that's
see to my ablutions, shall we say. So you carry on, Aidan. We're going to carry on until while Ian's with us. So we're not going to waste time that we've got with Ian by playing a couple of records. We're just going to carry on with Ian. For now, we're on Facebook Live and on raconteursnews.com, and we're on the Raconteurs News Facebook page, and we're on the Andy's Facebook page as well. And I've shared it around a few groups as well. So, Ada, you continue.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are not exactly what we've been talking about, Ian, so far, but I definitely do want to go further down the road that we're heading down. But if we could just stop that for 1 minute. Just with the thing with the debt and the way things are going, so that effectively they've got the professionals of the future, let's call them, the students, by the balls before they even leave their education. You're quite right. It's just debt. I did hear on the news today that, I can't remember which politician was, he was going to get rid of this debt-ridden society. Well, I'd love to bloody know how he's going to do that when we've got a debt-based economy.
Well, I mean, there's only really a couple of ways that could be done. First of all, one will be to forgive all debt. And that's not quite so outrageous as it may seem, because that's exactly what happened in Germany after the Second World War.
Yeah.
Where all debt was forgiven and everybody basically started from wherever it was they were at that time. The other way, of course, and this is something that absolutely has to happen, is we have to move away the fractional reserve banking system. And of course, this has really been the agenda ever since 1913 with the establishment of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
And this Federal Reserve has been around now for 105 years, 104 and a bit. But it's not the first time that the banksters tried to establish a Federal Reserve, but they were thwarted in the previous attempts because the senators who back in the 18th and 19th century, The senators were all smart guys. In fact, you couldn't actually stand for election unless you were a man of means. And the reason for that, and by the way, it was pretty much the same in the UK. The reason for that was that if you were a man of means, then in theory, you understood the way of the world. You were less likely to be susceptible to bribery and corruption.
It's now a prerequisite.
It's not a prerequisite, no, but the idea was that you were less likely to be, and it was considered to be, morally unacceptable to be found guilty of being corrupted in politics. Unfortunately, that's not the case today. Anyway, when the Federal Reserve became established in 1913, I mean, Woodrow Wilson knew he'd been outmaneuvered. And, he realized that basically the prognosis was ultimately one of bankruptcy. And, of course, the US has an absurd debt of, I think it's estimated at being something in the region of about $18 trillion, but which will never be repaid. And who's it owed to anyway? And, of course,
I was just going to say, if every country in the world's in debt, who the bloody hell do we owe it to?
Well, exactly. But they'll just keep pumping more fake money into the system. And eventually, obviously, the net result is the hyperinflation that, we've seen in the likes of Zimbabwe and Argentina. So how do we break through this? Well, there has to be, a motivation by, a cross-party group of politicians, because if one man tries to put his head above the parapet and say that, you know what, we're going to end fractional reserve banking and we're going to re-establish a currency that is backed partially by gold, partially by silver, and partially by the labour of the people of the country. And basically pretty much start from scratch. But if one man does that, he's going to end up like JFK.
I was just going to say, the last man to do that was called JFK, wasn't he?
Exactly. So it has to be done on a cross-party basis. There has to be some very serious commitment. Before you can get that, though, politicians need to understand how the financial system works, and the reality is they don't.
Ian, they absolutely don't. And whenever we talk about money, and finance is my background, but whenever we talk about money on Raconteurs News, we always have the question, and it's just come up again from Chris Jones, what about the Bradbury pound?
Yeah, I mean, the Bradbury pound is like the greenback, the Abraham Lincoln.
That's right.
And same with Kennedy, and he tried to put, I think, something like at the time it was a lot of money, but a few million into the American economy that wasn't borrowed from the banks. Because obviously, for those people, I'm sure everyone listening to this knows how it works, but basically, government says it needs money, it goes to the central bank, which is privately owned, says we need some money, the bank says how much do you need, the bank then prints it or puts it onto a computer screen, and from that point forward charges interest on it. I mean, even when the Federal Reserve was set up in December of 2013, they had no money. But what happened is...
1913, I think you mean, Ian.
Say again?
1913, not...
Sorry, did I say 2013? Sorry, 1913. When it was set up in 1913, the Federal Reserve didn't have any money, or not that it was going to make use of. So what it did was it effectively lent the US government a few million, which it created out of thin air, and then charged interest on it right from the get-go. So every single pound, every single dollar, every single euro that's in circulation, somebody somewhere owes interest on that fiat currency. And of course, it's totally unsustainable.
Of course it is. Listen, we've been joined by Paul Webster, the guy that booked you, who's been a bit late. He's come back from work and he's joined us. Are you there, Paul?
Yeah, mate, I was just going to... Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm just... I want to drag you in because you're the one that's booked the guest for this evening, Ian Crane. and we've only got him for another sort of 25 minutes. So if there's anything that you want to ask Ian, or anything you want to talk about.
Well, I'll just sit out for a minute, because I don't know what you've talked about, so I don't want to rehash things. So I'll just jump in from now, whenever. So just carry on with what you're doing, boys.
Okay, Ian. When you were talking about money and debt and all the rest of it, I just want to bring it back to Amber Rudd. You know, when these so-called leaders, and you know, my view. For those of you that don't know, I'm an anarchist. I mean, I just think we should just bloody ignore the idiots out of existence. But when they stand there on the news and say things like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I inadvertently misled the public." No, you're a fucking lying bitch. But when you've got people who actually believe that shit, you know, how on earth can we then say to the people who are just going to watch that and then switch over and watch EastEnders, did you know that money's not real? All they're bothered about is what's on X Factor.
Well, look, we're never going to get through to a significant percentage of the population, but it doesn't need to be a big percentage. You know, when the US went into the War of Independence with the British, it's actually estimated that only 3% of the population took up arms against the British, and only 8% of people in the US actually wanted independence anyway. So, you know, it doesn't need a big number. The fact that the vast majority of people are apathetic is beneficial to the establishment, and in some respects, it's not a hindrance to us. Because provided we can keep moving forward and encouraging people to actually take a look at things for themselves. I mean, the problem is that, you know, there are people who try and preach, and that will turn people off. You know, we have to be smart. We have to stimulate people's own sense of curiosity, you know, and get them to look at things for themselves. And then when they come to their own realization, then prompt them to, you know, maybe look a little bit deeper, or even, you know, feign shock and say, well, what else have you discovered? You know, nurture that curiosity. You know, we are a long, long, long way from where I was when I started, you know, sharing my thoughts and insights in the early part of this century. You know, I first started doing public presentations in 2003. So, you know, I've been on the road for 15 years. And the one thing I can categorically state is that the level of awareness today is exponentially greater than it was in 2013. Now, 2003. Now, we haven't reached the critical mass yet by any stretch of the imagination. But even us having this conversation that we're having now would have been nigh on unthinkable, you know, 15 years ago. And
oh, yeah.
You know, and that's obviously the technology has backfired there, because, you know, the connectivity that we have today has helped this raising of awareness. And it's, you know, it's a bit of a problem for the establishment, because they're desperately trying to find a way to curtail the open access to information on the web, but they can't, because the global economy is so linked in to the web that they can't do one without effectively destroying the other. So they're desperately trying to find ways to marginalize the alternative community, to marginalize the alternative media, yet the reality is that more and more people are ditching the mainstream press. I mean, the readership of the combined readership of the Mail and the Sun today is barely what the Sun readership alone was just 8 years ago when the Tories came to office. Wow. The BBC are losing license payers hand over fist. And, you know, this is, I mean, it's a combination of factors. You know, one is obviously that more and more people are just getting information off their smartphone. But as people get their information from their smartphones, they're tending to get it from multiple sources. So there is more likelihood of them latching on to an alternative media site if they're getting their information online than there is if they're reliant on picking up the Sun or the Mail on their way to work.
Yeah, sure.
You know, we just got to keep chipping away. We've got to keep doing what we're doing, and what you guys are doing is fantastic, because you know we all reach different audiences, and you know, whereas with the BBC it was like, you know, the big rock thrown into the centre of a pond, and then that big rock created ripples that went, you know, all around the country. What we're doing now is, you know, it's like lots of little pebbles, and you know, all the pebbles thrown into the pond, and then all the ripples that go out from those pebbles. So not everybody sees everything that, you know, you or I put out, but it doesn't matter, because the people who we reach out to, then they're then sharing it with others, who are then sharing it with others, and then sharing it with others, and that's how we stimulate people's curiosity to look at this stuff. And when we put it up online, when we put it up on Facebook, we put it up on YouTube, it's there. and you know, as much as they try and do to hide it, it's still there, and it will still be found.
Ian, I absolutely agree. But you know, one thing we all know that a lot of these apps on our phone, and Facebook's probably the biggest. You know, it's just an information farm. Now, what I've sort of, I mean, I don't do Facebook, but if people are going to do Facebook, let's give them something to farm. Let's give them some information, and let's let them know that we know what they're on with.
Well, exactly. I mean, anybody who uses Facebook to put personal information on, then you know you're just not paying attention. I mean, I never put stuff on Facebook. I mean, the closest I got to that was you know, my daughter's wedding last year, and that was really only so that my elderly parents, you know, who couldn't travel, could actually, you know, watch the events unfold. But that is the only personal thing I have ever put on Facebook. The only reason that I use Facebook is literally to share information or to glean information from, you know, particular individuals or particular sources that I trust. So, you know, it's like all things, it's up to people how they use the tool, and you know, we got to try and encourage the younger generation to be using it more appropriately than, you know, just sharing their bits around their friends.
Ian, a couple of comments on what we've been discussing so far, some from the chat room and some from messages sent to me, and another thing. American War of Independence was, people just decided in America they didn't want the English king to be their boss anymore over at less than 5% tax. And now look at what percentage most Americans are paying in tax today.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, Abraham Lincoln certainly never intended that any individual should pay tax on their labour.
And you know what I always think about on like American Independence Day and all these flag wavers, you know, the people who actually formed the United States as we know it today, they were criminals. They were anarchists who basically went to the British aristocracy and said, "You are not the boss of us anymore." And that's the stage that the people in the States and the people certainly in the UK have got to get to, where, you know, they actually go and say, you know, you are not the boss of us anymore. It's not yours to decide anymore. You weren't scared of us, but now you need to be. And that's the stage we've got to get to.
No, you're absolutely right. Of course, I mean, obviously, you know, those who were leading the rebels against the British Army, you know, were regarded as terrorists.
Yeah, the founding fathers were terrorists.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but they're revered today, of course.
Yeah, we've got a recurring theme that keeps popping up. Someone keeps asking the same a similar question, and I don't know whether you want to comment on it or not. We've had this particular person on the show, and they're wondering what you thought about Dr. Judy Wood's book, Where Did the Towers Go? That's someone in the chat room, someone called
Alistair.
Alistair.
Hey, listen, it's a hypothesis, just like every other hypothesis about 9/11. I mean, anybody who tells you they know exactly what happened on 9/11, you know, was either working for the perpetrators or was part of the team of perpetrators. But, you know, I think we all know what didn't happen on 9/11. But as far as I'm concerned, you know, Judy's book is a hypothesis. just as the controlled demolition is a hypothesis. And, it's up to people to come to their own determination. Frankly, right now, it's a distraction. It's important that people understand the impact that the events of 9/11 had on the mass consciousness. And of course, the document Rebuilding America's Defenses, which was published in September of 2000, is effectively the blueprint. It was almost a rewrite of another Zbigniew Brzezinski book, The Grand Chessboard, which he wrote and published in 1997. But the Rebuilding America's Defenses document, there were 27 signatories to that document. 13 of them went straight into George Bush's government, and it includes the likes of John Bolton, who is the new national security advisor to Donald Trump, and that guy was put on this earth to instigate global conflict. He's been desperately trying to do that for 25 years, and he has picked up the mantle where Kissinger and to some extent Brzezinski left off. And the other signatories were the likes of Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, William Kristol, Richard Pearl. Well, people could find the document and take a look for themselves. But in that document, it talks about the need for a catalyzing event to effectively goad the American public into supporting the American quest to establish global hegemony. And 9/11 was that event. And I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to work out, who was behind that event, who has benefited from that event. And, listen, I will keep an open mind as to what happened on 9/11. And like I said, we all know what didn't happen, and we all know what has subsequently happened. And, we all know that we are dealing with a rampant global corporatist state, within the West in particular. And unless we focus on bringing about the downfall of those global corporatists, the legacy that we are leaving future generations really doesn't bear thinking about. And there's no question 9/11 was a significant turning point, but in both directions, because whilst the events of 9/11 gave the administration in the US the short-term support of the American public, which is why they were able to go into Afghanistan, what was it, barely 4 weeks after 9/11, and then go back into Iraq, less than 18 months after 9/11. But what it's also but what it's also done, it has, without any shadow of doubt, been a trigger in getting people to actually question what the fuck is going on.
Yes. I mean, my view... Sorry, Webby.
Sorry, mate. I find, Ian, that, as you were saying, the 9/11, it's all, there's all hypotheses going on about it. We do know what didn't happen specifically. But I find there's a lot of truth overflowing at the minute. And if you concentrate on those individual pieces of truth, which is seemingly what the mainstream media want you to do, because I've never seen politicians lie so blatantly and talk as much bollocks. I mean, I never thought in my lifetime I'd ever hear a prime minister and a Russian president, and the two sound so totally different, and the president of Russia actually talks more sense. And I think people are being given information to try and concentrate on to create that debate, which creates the divide. And I think there's a bigger picture, and if people can't just pull away and look at that bigger picture, join all these dots, then, it's a tendency to drag us down in the mud. But I agree with you, Ian, about the that tipping point. We're reaching that crest of that wave, because when I started this path 10 years ago, and you was touching on the money supply and stuff like that. I don't know if anybody's mentioned the bills of exchange, so I'll get it in now. But the bills of exchange, when I started to study that, and I realised what that meant, and all these bills that I can't pay, it's absolutely impossible to pay in a debt-based economy, then I wanted to tell everybody, and nobody wanted to know. But there was only me talking about it 10 years ago. As far as I was concerned, because nobody else, every time I was bringing it up, nobody knew about it. Now there's hundreds and thousands of people talking about it, Ian. So I've seen that growth, what you were talking about.
And we absolutely need to focus on what we agree upon and not get bogged down on what we disagree upon. I have the same issue within the anti-fracking community. There's a significant chunk of the anti-fracking community that wants to lead on the climate change issue. And, my observation to them is, look, there's a hell of a lot of people in the country who do not buy into the climate change issue.
Yep, me included.
Right? So, instead of being divided over whether or not climate change is anthropogenic, man-made, let's agree that there are significant industries that cause pollution. And let's focus on, the causes of pollution rather than get drawn into an unwinnable debate one way or the other. Because the only argument that I hear the climate change crowd say is keep talking about the consensus. The consensus is that. Look, the reality is, yes, if you want to believe it, there's a consensus.
But if you've got a majority of idiots who agree on something, that's a consensus.
Well, apparently, exactly. But the reality is, what do we agree on within the anti-fracking community? We agree on the fact that fracking is not good news, because the evidence shows us that it contaminates water, it contaminates soil, it contaminates the air, it causes horrendous issues in terms of negative health impact. So, we can all agree that fracking is something we need to stop. So we don't need to tag the climate change issue on it. And in fact, excuse me, Dave Kesterben, who we mentioned earlier, from Eckington Against Fracking.
Yep.
Dave is absolutely driven by his concerns about the climate. But he was smart enough to recognise that when you're sitting before a Tory-held council and you're trying to present a case that encourages them to do their research on fracking and reject the INEOS application on fracking in their county, to mention climate change in that forum, you run the risk of losing your audience.
Yeah, because they just see him as a tree.
He was smart enough to drop it from his presentation, and he got the result. A result 9-1 with a Tory government. So we have to get smart. We need Middle England. We absolutely need Middle England. It's not the middle classes, it's Middle England. It's the average Joe. And
One day old man.
Say again?
One day old man, as I think David Cameron called him, or it might have even been Tony Blair.
Right,
you're talking about the people. You've got two professional people that do a professional job. What we need is the squeeze to be put on them.
Exactly.
It's what I say a lot, Ian, that people tend to not want to get involved in this stuff. Personally speaking, people who I speak to, they understand what I'm saying, but they don't want to get involved because of that fear factor. And possibly I wouldn't have done, but when somebody comes up to you and said that they're going to bum you, I'm going to fight them because I'm not going to pull my pants down for you. This has got to come to a stop. And I think people do have to have that confrontation on them before, and I think that's happened quite a lot, and I think it's happening more and more.
Ian, I think what you've just said about let's not get bogged down, with people's motivation for wanting something to stop. You can almost hang that on every subject we've talked about tonight. It's like with 9/11. The only thing we do know is that the official story was exactly that, a bullshit story. What exactly happened and who instigated it all and who pressed what button when and how and what actually did it, does it matter? Because what really matters is what they told us isn't true.
Absolutely. I mean,
what came
obviously
from that?
In the ideal world, yes, it does matter. Of course, we'd like to know the detail, but the reality is we ain't going to get it.
Yeah.
And if we do get it, then we'll get it in a completely unexpected way when we're not expecting it. So, we might as well actually focus our energy where we can actually get a real return. And it's important to understand history. It's important to know what has led to bringing us to the point where we're at. But most of our energy needs to be focused on what we need to do to move forward, to bring about the changes that we all know we need to see. Because, I'm in the latter stages of my time on this mortal coil, and, however many days, months, years, or whatever it is that I've got left, then, my motivation is just to contribute in whatever way I can to try to stimulate people's curiosity to take a look at things for themselves. Because I know that when we reach critical mass, then things will change. And it won't happen because of one man. I mean, if anything happens because, somebody rides in on the white charger and says, I'm your savior, the bottom line is it will not have any kind of sustainability. It won't last. And the moment that individual moves out, we're in a situation like we were in Yugoslavia when Tito died, or in Venezuela when Chavez died. The moment that leader, that hero, is out the picture, then all hell breaks loose. So the only way in which you bring about change, and I hate the word because it's been hijacked, but change that has sustainability, change that can really stand the test of time and move in the right direction, has to come from critical mass. And that's why it's so important to stimulate the curiosity of the wider communities.
I do remember, Ian.
Sorry, Ian. Go on, Ed.
Yeah, I do remember at the anti-frack presentation that you gave in Sheffield that I attended, actually with Daisy, the girl who was the NHS whistleblower, the lady who got injured on the frack site. I distinctly remember you saying, look, have your own little group and talk to the other groups, but don't be one big group.
Absolutely. And we have probably had to put more energy into trying to keep that going, because every now and again you'll always get somebody who thinks that they are the natural leader and that everybody should fall in behind them. And and the point that we tried to make is that the moment that happens, it's over.
Yeah.
Because the establishment knows how to deal with a hierarchical structure.
Yeah.
It knows how to infiltrate it. It knows how to neuter it. What the establishment has no idea how to deal with is a morass of very highly networked, very highly interconnected groups. But each of those groups and individuals, because I operate as an individual, I'm not part of any group, but we're all interconnected and we're all completely autonomous. And everybody does whatever it is that they feel they can do, they want to do, they're motivated to do. They bring whatever skills they have, to the campaign. But there is no structure, and the establishment does not know how to deal with it. And that's why this model that we've established in terms of community activism, effective community activism. I'm not saying it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but at least it's a change in the paradigm of relying on NGOs or other kind of hierarchical structures to lead the change.
It's more difficult to co-op if we keep it that way. We've said it on the radio show about, we joke about there's 4 dickheads here that come together twice a week and just talk about real stuff, and there's people listening. And, they do say that within 12 friends, you could possibly know everybody in the world. If they just tell one, you just don't know where this goes. And, I think everybody, including all the years that you've done yourself, it's setting fires in the minds of men and women that they know there's something wrong. They all know. And it's the fear. They think that this is such a big machine, which I've been up against the front end of this machine. I know how big it is for one man. But when everybody starts talking about it, and the likes of what happened with Ireland when the mortgage market collapsed, it pulled people together to start talking. And everybody's got pieces of the puzzle, and nobody, as you just said, nobody's got the story of anything, be it let alone 9/11. Nobody's got the full story of it. And we've just got to keep doing what we do. That's it.
Exactly. Yeah. We are where we are. And unfortunately, it may well have to get a lot worse before it gets better. I mean, we haven't mentioned it tonight, but I mean, let's not forget that it is not even 7 weeks since we were on the cusp of global conflict. All on the back of a lie, of course, or multiple lies. But nonetheless, the world looked to be on the brink of global conflict on Friday the 13th of April. And then, subsequent events have fortunately pulled us away from the brink. And, of course, the Amber Rudd bullshit, conveniently takes the public interest away from all the lies and the deceit surrounding the Sergei Skripal affair and the allegation of chemical weapons in Duma. So this is the new distraction. So Amber Rudd is effectively the sacrificial lamb to take the media attention away from what potentially is far more damaging for the British government. And
Ian,
this
I've
is
got a comment
the
that
way
I'd
the
like
game works.
Sorry, Ian, I've got a comment I'd like to read out about Amber Rudd, and I'm reading this, so if it sounds a bit parrot fashion, it is. The leak from the Home Office is not a leak. It's a whistleblower in the public interest, exposing a lying, corrupt Home Secretary who tried to get away with openly lying at the Select Committee meeting. She shouldn't have been allowed to resign. She should have been subject to a disciplinary process, investigated and then sacked.
Well, let's understand why that information was leaked. And it was leaked because Amber Rudd, in her naivety, stood up in Parliament about a week ago and tried to blame the civil service for what had transpired. And, what she, in her 8 years in Parliament, has failed to grasp is that at the end of the day, the civil service is able to operate and does operate with a far more Machiavellian agenda than she could even begin to comprehend. So the moment she stood up in Parliament, and I saw this coming, and I said to a number of people when I heard that speech, I said, now she has really shot herself, not in the foot, but in the head. Because the moment she stood up and tried to lay the blame on the civil service, she was dead and buried.
I think when you think, there must
Jason,
be
you wanted to say something?
Oh, sorry.
Jason,
all I wanted to do is I didn't want to encroach on. Ian told us at 8 o'clock that he only got like.
I'm getting pulled away as we speak now, so I need to wrap. Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, that's no problem, Ian. Listen, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been absolutely superb. The reaction that we've had in the chat room and on Facebook Live in the chat, lots of comments on there as well. And we'll post links to that on your Facebook page and everything. Anywhere that you want people to go, any websites or anything like that you want people to be directed to?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you're in an area that has an anti-fracking group, then go along and give them some support in some way, shape, or form. If you're in an area that doesn't have an anti-fracking group, consider starting one up. And if you want to come along and meet with some 300 like-minded people, then consider maybe coming along on a day basis to the Alternative View conference this coming weekend, and the information is on the Alternative View website. That's www.alternativeview.co.uk.
Brilliant. Excellent.
Just one more comment before you go, Ian, that Chris Jones from Beat the Banks of the Bailiffs has posted in the chat room that it was Ian who gave him the idea regarding the format of Beat the Bailiffs and the Banks. Many organically grown local Beat the Banks and Bailiffs and autonomous groups, splinter groups, have tried to copy that and set up groups themselves. So we just wanted to thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And what Chris has done with Beat the Bailiffs is truly outstanding. And this is exactly the type of initiative that we need to encourage. Whatever it is that motivates people, then that's fantastic. As long as they get off their butts, get away from their computer, and actually do something, because that's what the establishment doesn't want.
Super. Brilliant. Right. Thank you very much, Ian.
Thanks, guys.
Far more of the time than we should have done. So thank you very much for joining us. And hopefully we'll have you on again soon when you've got some updates.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.
Thanks,
Brilliant.
Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Bye-bye.
All right then, guys. It's just down to us four. I don't know whether you want to play a record or you just want to carry on talking of horses.
I've just got to... Alistair Norman in the chat room was, why doesn't Ian talk about Dr. Judy Wood's book, Where Did the Towers Go? I'm not going to try and answer it for him, but one thing I'd like to point out is 9/11 was one massive, massive day for the world, and they were right. The world will never be the same again. And we will never know all of the facts. And I think what Ian and myself and Jason and all the other bloody thousands of people who are out there trying to raise awareness of things, the subjects we've talked about tonight and others, is 9/11 is a good way of waking people up. Without using that bloody horrible phrase, I can't think of a better one. But if we really want to get to people and get them to open their eyes, it has to be about something that's current. That's my view. And, I've always talked about how do we get a bigger choir instead of preaching to the same people every week. And I think it's really up to all of us to, whatever is stimulating somebody, is to try and come in with an alternative view of it. Whether it's Amber Rudd, whether it's 5G, whether it's chopping trees down in Sheffield, whether it's fracking, whatever it is, we've got more chance with something current, as much as we would all love to know exactly who did what on 9/11 and exactly how. I would love to have all that knowledge and be able to share it. Sadly, I don't think we're ever going to get there. But what we can do is try and get people to understand that really the world is upside down. Money is debt. War is peace is not peace, it's war. And, this world is not broken. It's working perfectly. It's just not for us.
Just backward. Everything's backward. Everything's the opposite to what they promote.
Yeah,
and when people get... Go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, because that's what suits their agenda. And what we've got to do is try and give people snippets, whether it's about... sorry, I can't think. What's it called, Webby? You never mentioned it before.
Bills of Exchange.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, the Bills of Exchange. It just for about 10
I don't
seconds.
talk about it. Don't like talking about it.
No, you don't. I know you don't. So, so whether it is Bills of Exchange, whether it is Amber Rudd and now it's just a pile of shite, or, whether it is about infrastructure, whatever it is, we've got to find the triggers that open somebody's eyes.
Well, if you can't tell people that the bills that they are struggling to pay, that they are not liable to pay them and they should research it, I don't know how else, because it is very money orientated, but they've got to get over that fear. And I don't know how you get somebody over that scared part. I know people who've just got babies and stuff like that, and they're not willing to take anything on like that. Go on, Jason.
Just to address that last point you made, Ada, that we've got to get these things. They get these. You can't force somebody to wake up. They'll wake up of their own volition. I was pumping at you with shit for fucking 6 months, and then something happens to you, and something happens to you or to somebody that you in your family, and then suddenly you want an answer, and then you realise and you see it. So we can't open people's eyes, but what we can do is we can give them the seeds that will help them to open their own fucking eyes. Just a simple thing when a T-shirt that says "I want my vision back."
Yeah.
A T-shirt, I want my vision back, and someone asks you, "Well, what does that mean? You're not blind, are you?" No, I'm not. No, but I wanted my vision back, and I got my vision back. I got my vision back because I saw what really were going on. And you can only plant them little seeds and hope that something... You don't want anything bad to happen to anybody, but, there is a good point to that if they then go and seek help from somewhere other than the fucking shit that's put in place for people to seek help. Like these debt things and that. Someone might get into debt or lose their job or fucking do this, do that. That's what's going to wake them up. Whatever you say is not going to fucking work until something happens to them. And the more and more that they're squeezing on us, the more and more people are going to be like, hang on a minute, what the fucking hell's this? What you said earlier on about tax, fucking 5% tax, that were a stamp duty, weren't it? They used to go into people's houses, and if they'd not got a stamp on furniture, they'd obviously not paid the duty on that. So then they fucking that's what the American War of Independence were over. Apparently, I don't know. I mean,
less. It was either 4 or 5. I can't remember the exact, but it was a single digit. Certainly, it was 5 or less percent. You know, and the American public are paying a lot more than that in tax these days. You know,
exactly.
And, you know, it's like I've said before. You know, it used to be called the War Department. Now it's called the Ministry of Defence. It's not. It's the Ministry of War, because that's what they do. They take your money and they drop bombs on little brown kids and tell you that it's so that no brown kids come and fucking invade us. What a load of shit.
Well, sometimes we've got to deliver this democracy because of these evil dictators that doesn't seem to be around really anymore. But people are still buying into that story. Less and less, like Ian was saying, TV licenses are being dropped because they know they are being fed a bucket of shit every time it comes on.
There's an epidemic in Sheffield, and I'm partially responsible for it.
Well, I am. I don't pay my TV license for the same reason I don't pay a paedophile to stand at the corner of my room telling me lies. So it's as fucking simple as that. Well, you know what I wanted to ask you fellas. Well, we've got about 20 minutes left. We can you know we can burn the fat. I just wanted to ask you opinions on what you thought and whether you thought it was a positive thing. The stuff in Korea over the last few days and weeks. I mean, we've had historic thing. It seems that like they just decide, right, let's just get rid of America and then we can be friends. We've got nobody like, you know, telling us, you know, that he's doing this or he's doing that or he's doing other. See, to me, I found it a positive thing, even if it's all fucking staged and it's done something. I found it a positive thing because people, it did get a lot of coverage on the mainstream media, and people will see then that, you know, it's another Kim Jong-un, one of these, like, you know, one of these fucking pariahs that were like dangled over people and say, you know, if you do this or you do that, or if we don't do this or don't do that, then this guy's going to nuke us. He can nuke us in 20 minutes. I think they use the old 45 minutes thing again. You know, it's completely fucking ridiculous. But now the two being put together and they're sort of reuniting country, and they're both disarming their nuclear capabilities, which I think is a good thing.
Webby, do you want to go?
Go on, Dave.
Right, okay.
I can do.
Yeah, go on then, mate.
My take on it is, Jason, that Trump has obviously been, and he's spoken with Kim Jong-un, and there was a bit of an attack there saying that, you know, my button's bigger than yours and all this bullshit. But if Trump is doing what some people think, which is trying to hoodwink the hoodwinkers, because I think there's some kind of a challenge going on in the upper echelons of this establishment, whatever the establishment is. And I think Trump is now attempting to build bridges towards Russia, or at least Russia and China and North Korea and South Korea are all saying that, you know, well, if you join us, we're going against these, which is the West in effect. Now, is Trump playing both sides? We don't know. Is he just a puppet? We don't know. All the others have been just puppets. Are we to think that this man's a really clever guy to look like a dumb idiot that's going to come out? Well, if he does, as I don't know if it was you, AD, or I think it was Ian that was saying it, this white knight who's coming in as this saviour, you know, it's not going to last. And, you know, if you want to get biblical about it, they say that there will be times of tribulations and there'll be a saviour that comes, but he won't be the right one. whether that is the Antichrist or whatever, if you're going into biblical stuff, it doesn't matter. But this is the chess game. This is the game that they're playing. And if you're focusing on the pawns or a rook or anything like that and not looking at the board, then you're missing out. But I think there's something going on with Asia, because we were talking about Chinese have got a lot of pull over America because of the amount of American debt they hold. But it's all to do with playing this money. Is there a Rothschild banking system in China? Have North Korea now decided they're going to have one? This is what's going to unfold, and that'll what be interesting for me.
My sort of take on it is that, right back to basics, there are 13 families that own everything.
Yeah.
And within those 13 families, there's as much dick waving as who's got the biggest cock as we see with Trump and North and South Korea and China. There's as much happens that we don't see by these 13 families and the Rothschild banking system, etc. So when you look at it at the stuff that we don't see, I think that the puppets are being told to dick wave in a certain way so that the 13 families who we don't see are actually having a bit of a tiff between them to see which 2 or 3 of those main families are going to be the main puppeteers for the next 100 years.
Yeah, that's what I say. Is there's a battle up at the top, and we're not meant to see what the battle's between. We're meant to focus on the lower bits.
Yeah,
and that's where we let ourselves down.
And it don't matter whether it don't matter which country you're supposedly the leader of. You're the leader of fuck all. You know, the politicians, they come and go. The leaders, they come and go. But the 13 families and all these bloodlines are always there.
Yeah. Always have been.
Very profound, AD. That is just very profound. It is very profound.
And I've not even been
drinking Thailand, and you've like got some new wisdom, haven't you? You've covered yourself in wisdom and covered young girls in your wisdom.
You see, you know, in 2 years and 9 months, I won't give a shit because I'll be living somewhere where it's 30 degrees every day.
Well, what I'll be doing is I'll have revealed that the jet engines don't use any fuel, because that would just be ridiculous for them to be carrying that much liquid about in them fucking flimsy wings. And I'll have got my free ticket over to come and stop with you for a couple of days. But,
you really think Danielle's going to let you do that?
Listen, mate, she'll have no choice. I've got Rohypnol.
Yeah, but is that for when you get to Thailand or to give your wife before you go?
To give her before I go. Oh, God, I'm not wasting good Rohypnol on somebody I'm paying. Oh, brilliant.
Listen, you know, I'm a simple guy. And since my enormous kick up the arse from Mr. Jason Holmes, the thing that woke me up was the one thing that I did know about, or I thought I did, which was money. And when I realised I knew fuck all about the industry that I've been working in for 20 years and how it really works, that was what gave me the kick up the arse. And there are 2 fundamental things that you've got to remember, and then the third one that supports it all. And the first one is 13 families own everything. Secondly, money is not money, it is debt. And it's that simple. And when you break everything down to look at any event anywhere in the world, whether it's on the BBC, whether it's Amber Rudd, whether it's fracking, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's 5G, whether it's chopping trees down, whether it's NLP, whatever subject you want to get into, who benefits? It ain't me, it ain't you. It's the banking system and the 13 families. And it is the absolute
problem you got there.
Everything.
The problem you got there, AD, right, is you've put it down to like one thing, okay, and everything sort of spreads out from that. I was going to make the point earlier on with Ian about two things that I thought were conjoined but actually weren't. But anyway, you're talking. You've condensed it down, right, to just one thing. Now, we've got a radio show to do here. If we're just going to do the one thing every fucking time, you have to sometimes delve into the other things, like we're going to be doing tomorrow night with Dave Von Kleist, who's going to be joining us, who was the director, and he made 9/11 in Plain Sight and 9/11 Ripple Effect.
Yes,
he's going to be joining us tomorrow night. So we are going to be going over some old 9/11 stuff, and it is really interesting. Don't forget, we're making an entertainment show here as well. So just to tool it down to like one thing, we really do need to discuss the other stuff, and just for the sake of our listeners, really.
All I'm saying is, in David Icke terms, join the dots.
That's what you got to do. You got to start joining the dots, but. There's a lot of people who would never even imagine that 13 families could rule this world. They can't imagine a lot of things. Most people, their imagination's been put into a box. I watched an interesting debate yesterday where they had people who were trying to make an argument against somebody's other arguments, and the more questions they got asked, you could see how it was constraining them. They couldn't be fluid. They couldn't move with the debate, because they had to keep coming back to the same rhetoric. And you could see it became cringeworthy at one point because they had nothing new to present, and they kept reverting back to like mainstream science, mainstream articles, all this. And people have got to understand that information has been taken over and supplied to you for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And when people start going on about, oh, it's a fucking online blog, there's research that these people are doing, including myself, including Jason, including you, AD and Andy. We've sat for many, many hours doing our own research. To say that, oh, he's just an internet blogger, that is not only disrespectful for the amount of time and effort we put in, and, fucking studying courtrooms and stuff like that, proving this stuff, it's as disrespectful as some fucker turning around and saying, prove it, show me the court documents, show me the win, show me this, show me that. Fuck you. Start doing some research. This is coming for you, whether you want to hide from it or not. I'm fucking sick of people wanting safe spaces. This isn't a world to have a safe space unless you give everything up. And then it's not safe, it's control, and it's slavery. And we're volunteering to be slaves at the minute. How far do we have to get back down that line where they're asking you for your papers, you've not got your papers, you speak out? I've just come across an article now from 5 days ago where judges are stating that social media should be put on trial, and people who are talking about judges' decisions should be looked at. That's how far they're willing to go now. Let it go, you know what happens.
Whatever subject we touch on, we always end up with the opposite. In that what we're actually being told isn't just untrue, the actual opposite is the truth.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether it's, any subject we've talked about tonight, anything at all. But for me, the big thing, and it is now getting more and more apparent to me, that 5G and how they can map your home and all the other stuff, that is fucking Big Brother on steroids. It really, really is.
Well, they introduced it with Xbox One, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah.
Xbox One Live, that's exactly what it does. It monitors your movements. How far does that go? Will it stay within your living room? I very much fucking doubt it if Wi-Fi doesn't. It's going to go through. It could map your house. If there's then tracking devices like smart TVs, smart fridges, smart washers, you've already got things talking to each other. Stick a smart meter in there. They know everything what's happening in your fucking house. And then what will you do? Hey, do you know what? I'm going to get one of those fucking legalised wiretaps. Alexa, what's for tea?
Well, I think Max Egan said when last time we were on, somebody had got been arrested for something they'd said in front of the fridge, and the fridge had picked it up. It had been monitored. It said something in front of the fridge, and it had been picked up and monitored and picked up, and he got arrested.
A fucking parrot ordered over $2,500 worth of stuff from Alexa through Amazon.
Fucking brilliant.
Oh, dear.
I think when they said, you're going to have to fucking pay for that, Polly, he says, well, I'll give you a promissory note.
Oh, dear. Fucking hell. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left. What else is pissing you off? Apart from fucking, I went down earlier to have me dog vaccinated. He's second bout of vaccines. It's amazing, isn't it? I'll vaccinate my dog, but I won't vaccinate my kids. But yeah, I went down earlier on. Fucking 6 o'clock appointment. 6 o'clock, and it fucking 20 to 7. Bear in mind, I'm fucking waiting.
And you're paying for this service.
And I've got like fucking 20 minutes before I'm on radio. 20 to 7 when I get in, and the fucking god, it fucking and the fucking woman receptionist, right? Decided to do a running commentary of everything. Everything she was doing, she was typing things in and saying, okay, Mr. So-and-so, we need to send you this, and fucking, there's nobody there. It was me in the fucking room, and someone else with a fucking another dog. Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Webby, I don't know if you caught this, but right at the beginning of the show, I mentioned...
No, I only got in about 8:05.
Yeah, right at the beginning of the show, I mentioned that the main article on the news this morning, other than Amber Rudd, the sacrificial lamb, other than that, the big headline of the day was, if you haven't got a TV license, don't worry about it, because you'll still be allowed to watch the royal wedding.
What a pile of shite. What a pile of fucking shite it is.
Yeah,
you've got this, everybody's looking at Amber Rudd, but has everybody forgot that Jeremy Hunt forgot to mention that he purchased 4 multi-million-pound flats? I forgot about them. People, they're doing this all the time. The civil service, through whatever echelons, run this fucking system. And all the MPs do as they're told, and they get the kickbacks. Just like Rudd, just like Cameron, just like me. And unfortunately, more than likely, if Corbyn gets to where he wants to get, it's more than likely going to be him, because it's the same fucking agenda. I'm like you, Ed. You think chaos is the way for you. Well, I'll tell you what isn't the way for me, then that's politics. It's the same fucking consciousness that has created all our fucking problems, that is now making it worse and causing genocide and poverty and starvation everywhere. And you can't fix it with the same consciousness. It's the definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome.
I just want to bring out a couple of things that have gone on in the chat room, and then I just want to finish off with one final thing that is a reflection on my holiday, but it isn't. Anyway, Owen Lloyd Martin... X-rated. You what, sorry?
Is it X-rated?
No.
Okay.
Owen Lloyd Martin, have you read about the Sainsbury's and Asda's merger? Bad news for the UK, your food's fucked. Yeah, we've all heard about that one. But quite an interesting comment. He's made another comment with the dots. Asda are Walmart, and Walmart are the same. Yeah, we know that. Walmart have a large percentage of Monsanto. I didn't know that one. So time to grow your own food. My final comment, because I know we're getting close to time, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jason and Webby. There's a really busy street in Thailand where I go, and it's a staggered crossroads. There is no pavement, there are no white lines, there are no signposts, there are no traffic lights, and I would say it is the busiest road junction I have ever seen, including Oxford Circus. The road is no wider than my little road outside, and I live on a cul-de-sac. There are motorbikes with 3 and 4 people and wardrobes on. There are buses, there are trucks, there are ladyboys on push bikes, any piece of transport you could possibly imagine, and I've never, ever, ever seen an accident at that junction. It's complete anarchy. But do you know, people get on with it. People don't crash into each other. People smile at each other. People stop for each other. And people let each other go. People drive on the wrong side of the road. And do you know what? Nobody in all of that anarchy gets mad or injured.
And don't forget, you saw a fella on a moped with a parrot.
I did see a fella on a moped with a parrot on the back, which was highly amusing.
Was he ordering shit from Amazon?
Yeah, he was ordering shit from Amazon on Alexi.
From Amazon. He had a little parrot ladyboy with him.
But you know, the point is, there's no fucking policeman stood there blowing a whistle and waving his arms and giving everybody rules and regulations. We don't need that shit. People are just getting on with their lives and being honourable and respectful to each other.
So what have you
without anybody telling them what to do. Because believe it or not, we are fucking human, and we're not all dumb and fucking stupid.
What about you for a last word, Paul?
Last word. Well, as I think, the way I look at it, lads, is, you know, I'm slightly repeating myself. From 10 years ago, it seemed like it was such an uphill battle. It was something that I had to do, and I had to dig hard for it. I had so many great, great people who have helped me along the way, pointing me in the right direction. But at the end of the day, I had to do the work. And I'm loving the fact that people are now listening and sharing. I've seen in the chat room.
Don't have any fucking choice, you mention it that often.
I don't know what you're talking about, Ed. You know, I don't mention it as much as fucking Thailand.
That's true,
No wonder the police aren't blowing whistles and fucking directing people, because they're all dressed as police, blowing middle-aged fucking Englishmen. But I'm so pleased, particularly this year. Me and you have had this conversation, Jason and Andy, particularly one night while Lady was away, that it's been quite a turnaround this year, that the show has hit what it has hit. And I mean, you know, we're not getting out of our fucking pram about it, but considering the four of us felt like we were sat around talking to ourselves a lot at one point, people are listening, people are sharing, and it can only be a good thing that people are talking about. And I've always said, people can't unhear something. They can debate it, they can say it's wrong, but they've got to have some fucking substance. You can't go, that's bollocks. Have you read this? No. Well, you can't say it's bollocks now. Fuck off.
Yeah.
Nice one. Well, if you think that it's difficult when four of us are sat here and you think you're talking to yourself, you should try when it's just you on your own. I did one show on my own for 2 hours, and although I did get a bit of help from Richie Allen, so yeah. Well, listen, thanks, fellas. It's been an enlightening show. I know you've only got here for the last sort of 50 minutes, didn't you, Paul? But still a valuable contribution, and a big thank you to Ian Crane again. And so we are going to be on tomorrow night. We've got Dave Von Kleist. Looking forward to that.
Jason, I think Alistair Norman's got to be in the chat room for that one, because 9/11, like all of us, I mean, fucking hell, they didn't just kill 3,500 people. Fucking countless. And how many souls did they kill that day? Certainly fucking killed mine for a while. You know, and it is a big subject, and hopefully tomorrow, you know, will we get any more answers? I don't know, but I'm certainly looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll definitely get some answers about things that were going on within the truth movement and the people that were up there as well. I'm really, really looking forward to asking Dave about when he bumped into Alex Jones in New York on one of the memorials, and Alex Jones just wouldn't talk to him. It was just ridiculous. But anyway, that's tomorrow night. Do not miss that. Well, that's just about it from us, guys. Thank you very much to Andy, who's been producing tonight. He's been sat there listening to us, probably had a few herbal cigarettes. So I'm sure he's all chilled and everything.
There he is. Morning.
Big thanks to Andy for producing. Don't forget, you can go to raconteursnews.com. Oh, get yourself an account. Log in. Get yourself in the chat. Get joined in. We love it here when people are getting involved. We'll be on Facebook Live tomorrow as well on my Facebook page, if it's fucking working, because it just weren't giving me any shit earlier on. It took me about 20 minutes to get it going. Yeah, we'll be on Facebook Live. We'll be on raconteursnews.com. We'll be on Spreaker.com/users/raconteursnews. Until tomorrow, have a great day, and we'll see you then.
My name is Stephen Hawking, and I used to listen to Raconteurs News.
You're listening to Raconteurs News. It's 2018. I fucking said 2018, didn't I? Instead of 2018. Like a wanker. This is live radio, people.
What the BBC tell us isn't what the government want us to believe, then just think of that and, think about who benefits, because at the bottom of everything is somebody benefiting from something somewhere. And there's one thing for sure. It fucking ain't me, and it ain't you.
And it's happening again. 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 And it's happening again.
It's down to us then to sort it out then, isn't it?
You get a dog, or a wolf, or a spider, or a snake. How can you get a snake to be the same species as a dog? It's easy. You call the species that bites you.
Weird.
That bites you.
Yeah, right.
That bites you.
Okay.
Yeah, you got a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a choice. Yeah, you got a choice.
Well, do you want a punch in the face or a kick in the bollocks? Jesus.
So what did you want to talk about?
Bollocks. Yes, Jason's bollocks. No bills of exchange.
That's not much I'm interested in fucking cricket.
Well, you'd have to have a modicum of intelligence, would you see, buddy? Exactly.
All they're thinking is,
Which one of us are you going to propose to this evening?
A lot of men who don't have sex.
If loving you is a crime, the way we are. All your instincts let you down. It's not a case of love in vain. It's not a case of love insane. It's enough to break your heart. But with your eyes wide open, you see the shape I'm in. It wasn't my idea that I'd be the one to sin. And so all those years together weren't worth a fucking dime. So